Welcome to episode 152 of Stageworthy. I'm your host, Phil Rickaby. Stageworthy is a podcast about people in Canadian theatre featuring conversations with actors, directors, playwrights, and more. I've been thinking about deadlines lately and how helpful they can be. When I was working on The Commandment, if you've listened to this podcast for a long time, you may have heard me mention that I worked on it for about 8 years, and if I had not set myself a deadline for actually performing it, I would still be working on it today. You know, that's not. I mean, it's great to work on things until they're right, but it's not helpful to never present something and never perform it. There's, I think, a certain point where good enough is good enough. Eventually I got to the point where I felt like it was good enough. And the only way to do that, to get to that point, was to set a deadline. And as I've been thinking about my own stagnation in terms of writing since I came back from fringing this year because I'd stopped for so long, I've been trying a few tricks to try to get myself writing. I've opened up some old drafts of things that I have left unfinished, and I've been editing those. You know, they were first drafts, and so they need some polish, but time to get to work on those. And so what I'm doing is I'm going to be having some people read those, because I always find it helpful to have people sit down with me and read them out loud so that I can hear how they sound and maybe find spots that don't work. So I'm doing that with one of my pieces that I've been working on. And all of this geared to sort of break myself out of the non-writing rut that I've been struggling with. Also, I've decided I'm going to do NaNoWriMo because why not? I am not really a novel writer. I've always felt like I wanted to write a novel, but I keep having ideas for plays and things that work best as plays. So I primarily find myself writing plays, but I like to stretch and do something different. And I'm kind of hoping that trying to do this, to write a novel in a month, well, that it will kickstart the creativity and keep that writing muscle going for me. If you're one of those crazy people who've decided that you want to try NaNoWriMo, maybe it's your first time. I've signed up to do it a bunch of times, and once I actually started writing, but I have never, quote unquote, won. But if you're thinking about doing it, or you are doing it, you can find me. You can join me on the NaNoWriMo website. I'm Phil Rickaby on there, so you can probably find me easily. And we'll see how that goes. If you want to tell me about something that you're writing about, remember you can find Stageworthy on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at StageworthyPod. You can find the website at stageworthypodcast.com. And if you want to drop me a line, you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Phil Rickaby. And my website is philrickaby.com. My guests are Andrew Gaunce and Jordi O'Dael of Aberrant Theatre, who present the Ghostlight Anthology at the Box in Toronto, starting October 18th. You guys are working, the project is Ghostlight?
Yeah, the Ghostlight Anthology.
Okay. Tell me about that.
Oh, after you.
Like, about how it started, about where the idea came from.
Well, let's start with describe what it is. What's the elevator pitch for the Ghostlight Anthology?
The Ghostlight Anthology is a collection of 5 short horror plays. It is a live horror experience.
Okay.
Altogether.
And so, where did that come from? Where did it start?
So it came from the sort of need to create live horror experiences that are narrative driven, because traditional theater tends to pull its punches in terms of creating the same experience that you would get from like a really well crafted horror movie, and like Halloween haunt style attractions tend to be devoid of a narrative storytelling element. It's more about how many people can jump out at you, and and not necessarily examining what is so cathartic about fear.
A number of years ago, I was sort of thinking about, of all of the genres that theater tends not to explore now. Horror is one of the main ones that we don't tend to touch.
Yeah. It's starting to come back a little bit.
It is.
Less so around here, though.
No, it's true. I think it may hinge a little bit on the fact that we're so used to horror in movies. And in movies, you could do a jump cut, and you could do, like, camera tricks and stuff, which means that horror in theater becomes a little bit more of a challenge.
Yeah.
What do you see as, like, how, if that is the case, how does horror work on stage?
Horror in a live experience and on stage, I think, largely depends on the atmosphere you create. There has to be a contract between what you're doing and the audience, a level of handing over that suspension of disbelief and allowing yourself to exist in this world where maybe the things that you're seeing and the horror that you're seeing isn't as satisfying as what you can see in high definition at Cineplex, which I think relates to sort of, at least I don't want to speak for Andrew, but generally with what we've talked about, our ethos towards theater in general, in the sense that you can't create theater that aims to replicate naturalistic experiences that happen on screen. Because why would anybody pay money to leave their house and sit in rooms with, like, a bunch of strangers for an experience that they can get for $7 a month on the comfort of their own house?
Yeah, exactly. Yes, 100%. This is, like, the third time I've had the conversation this week about, like, how to, like, which is the question: does indie theater get get people out of their house, away from Netflix, and into the theater? And it has to be experience.
Yeah. And so, as that, to make horror, sort of work on stage is it's a lot of, like, faith and trust in your audience, that your audience is there because they want to be and because they want to feel something.
Yeah.
It's people inherently want to come and feel something, whether it's joy, whether it's shock, whether it's fear.
Yeah.
And for us, it's our job to facilitate that. To let it happen.
Yeah.
I think about this a lot in terms of things like Cirque du Soleil or magic acts or things like that. They don't necessarily struggle to draw people in and come see things. Why is that? And it's because that element of seeing it live.
Yeah.
You can film Cirque du Soleil, but you can't replicate the feeling of being there.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah, because we think. I mean, a lot of people think about theater as kind of boring.
Yeah.
We don't think about it as dynamic. We don't think. A lot of people don't think about it as exciting because a lot of times we walk into a theater, and on that stage is a couch and an armchair, and a coffee table, and we can see that at home, So is this the first is this the first time the anthology is put together, or is this?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. This is the first time we're putting it together in a big actual production for sure.
And what made you decide to do it this year?
Honestly, I have been trying to do it for a couple years, and it's just never quite been the right time. Like last year around Halloween, there was another horror project that was starting to go up, so we're like, well, let's maybe wait till another year. And this year it just sort of seemed stars aligned. It's just, we can't wait anymore. 2017 was the highest grossing year for horror films in history. So it's just on a crass sort of market share perspective, strike while the iron's hot.
Yeah, absolutely. What do you remember what the show that was playing the last time that you were thinking about it? Was it what was it?
It didn't actually happen.
Oh, okay. That's unfortunate.
Yeah.
That's unfortunate.
Yeah. Maybe we can chat off the record on that one.
No, I don't want to like get anybody like in uncomfortable positions here. Because I've seen a couple of shows. Do you know Eldritch Theatre?
Yeah, yeah.
Like the stuff that he does is incredible.
Cool. So cool.
And sometimes he does. Sometimes it's horror. This year it's sci-fi, but sometimes it's horror.
Right.
And it's really effective horror, which totally gives the lie to the whole like, oh, but horror doesn't work on stage. But there used to be a time when horror was pretty common on stage. Like in France, the I'm going to get the name wrong, but
I never know how to say it out loud either.
But there was a whole tradition, the Grand Guignol, whatever.
Yeah, something like
that. Somebody is right now shouting, it's pronounced.
Yep.
But okay, you're not here. But there was a whole tradition, and in fact, the original play of Dracula was at its time horrific. People fainted watching that show.
Absolutely.
And yet we somehow lost that.
Yeah. I'm sure that, Mackers was intended as like, the thrilling Halloween hit of the year. There's those kinds of things. Like half of what Shakespeare wrote is like a horror. Seven Siblings did the horror version of
Titus.
And it was like, well, of course, Titus Andronicus is a horror play.
Absolutely, that's like the closest to a slasher.
Yeah, totally, it is. It is. It's a Shakespearean slasher flick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Andrew, you've been, and I only know this because of your show at the Fringe, you've been fascinated by horror for a long time.
Oh, absolutely.
Have you both been fascinated by horror? Or did you come to it later?
As a child, I wasn't allowed to watch horror movies because I was already like the most neurotic, terrified child.
Okay.
Who had like night terrors and all these kinds of things. So it was always kind of like my mom let me watch a lot of things that were inappropriate for me as a child. She kind of steered me away from horror movies. And so then as a teenager, it was just an obsession. And it was dragging all of my friends to the movie gallery and whatever we could get our hands on and watch those kinds of things. And my experience, I think, differs from Andrew's experience, where he was like, ooh, monsters, I'm not scared, like, blah, blah, blah. I had nightmares about nearly every horror movie that I watched. And that didn't necessarily fade away for me until, like I was 21. And there's still horror movies nowadays that I'm like, that I've we'll see in the theaters, and I'll have trouble for a couple of days after it. But I love it in a piecemeal kind of way. There are images that horror directors and horror creators make that are more evocative than anything you can see in any other genre. And I feel this way about sci-fi often too, and fantasy, is that I think when you abstract it a little bit, you have these images that you really do feel something from it. And when it's at its best, it's better than any like Oscar baity thing you could see.
Yeah. But Andrew, you enjoyed, like, you were a horror connoisseur from a very young age?
For sure. I grew up watching the Universal monster movies in the same rotation as Disney movies. Like, they were in the same VHS shelf at home. I was obsessed with Dracula. My imaginary friend growing up was the Invisible Man, not just like an Invisible Man, but like bandages and everything. It's just always been kind of an obsession. I don't know where it came from necessarily, but it's just, I think it's the imagination of it. It's something that could exist in our reality, but probably doesn't. But we don't really know what's in those shadows.
Do you remember what the first horror? Do you recall what the first horror you saw was?
Definitely Dracula.
Oh,
for sure. Okay. Yeah, Bela Lugosi, Dracula, in 1931. Yeah.
Did you find that scary?
Not at all. No, I found it fascinating.
Yeah,
I loved it.
It's funny because it's one of those things that I think now we don't see it as frightening.
Right.
Much like I watched Halloween for the first time maybe 2 years ago. I hadn't seen it ever before. And I was like, oh, this is, like, I've seen all of this. But I've seen all of this post Halloween.
Because of
Yeah.
Halloween.
Because of Halloween.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh, okay, so this is where all of that came from.
Yeah.
And sometimes movies don't age that well.
Not especially, no. I mean, Halloween created all those tropes.
Oh, of course,
It's
yeah.
so important.
Yeah.
Which is why I'm really excited about the new one, because it seems like they are going back to the drawing boards. It's going to be really cool to see how they reimagine and reinvent some of those tropes. You know,
Interesting, yeah.
however many years later, whatever,
Yeah.
40 years later, something like that.
I was terrified of horror movies, much like you were, Jordi.
Yeah.
In fact, it wasn't just horror movies. Like, Halloween was the worst time of year for me because, because like, I was scared of skeletons.
Oh, no.
Okay.
I don't remember where it started, but I do remember watching. I don't remember what show it was, and there was like some kind of dance number, and it was all these people in skeleton costumes dancing, and I nightmares for ages. So for me, Halloween was kind of terrible because everybody had skeletons up.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And so I just mostly stayed away from horror movies in general.
Yeah.
It's as I've gotten older that I find that I am more interested in horror movies, but certain kind of horror movies.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
I like the horror movies that leave something to the imagination.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And those ones tend to be better crafted in general. When you can't show everything you want to show,
Yeah.
you're forced to be more creative about how you do it. And also because the fear isn't when you see the monster,
No.
like, warts and all.
No, not at all.
It's what's behind the door. It's that feeling of dread. I think of, like Blair Witch Project or Paranormal Activity, these things that sort of like reinvented the wheel for horror nowadays. And a lot of that is like this sort of concept of found footage, but the other part of it is that they couldn't show you anything.
Yeah.
And they relied entirely on your ability to psych yourself out.
Yeah.
And humans are unbearably good at doing that.
Yeah.
Like, we're so attuned to sensing the pattern and seeing something wrong that all you have to do is like wave your hand suddenly and you will, like unsettle 5 people at once.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're incredibly... And in the theater, sound is so important. And... Because, there are things that we can't do in theater. We can't do close-ups and things like that. But, like... I've been involved with productions, one of Macker's, in fact, where the snapping of balsa wood was super effective in making an entire audience just lose their shit.
Oh, cool.
Can you tell me what are the shows that are in the Ghostlight Project this year?
So, as I said, there's 5 shows. The first piece is called Fortune's Fool by Jared Michael Delaney. It is... Should I describe I don't really want to give up the...
Don't give them too much.
Yeah, no spoilers.
Is there like a tease that you can give
Yeah.
about what it's about?
So, Fortune's Fool is what happens when you're at a carnival and
for some people, that's all you have to say.
Yeah.
Because a carnival, somehow in our psyches, and I'm not quite sure why this is, a carnival can be a terrifying place.
Yeah.
Although I want to be clear, there are no clowns in Ghostlight Anthology. Just because I know a lot of people are like, clowns are my line in the sand. I can't do clowns.
Yeah.
There's
What is it's that's kind of like, to me, that's hilarious. There's so many people who are like, I can't do clowns, and yet most clowns are not what they're thinking. But
Yeah. I guess there's this sort of like uncanny valley of like clowns themselves. I also think for, the generation we are, sort of cutting your teeth on the Tim Curry.
yeah, I was about to say
It.
Tim Curry and It sort of ruined clowns for an entire generation.
Yeah.
Yes,
And now with the remakes, they're ruined clowns for the next one.
Yeah, we gotta, maybe we should stop doing that.
With that, like Ryan Murphy, like clowns are just, you can't really do them the way. And also because, like, this is gonna get like weirdly political or whatever, but like so much of like clowns and the sort of stereotypical clown what that we look at is based off of like very sort of like racist pastiches and things like that is designed to make you inherently uncomfortable.
Yes, yeah.
Like to laugh at or to, you know, it's like, oh, that is other than who I am.
And it's very much the circus clown.
Yeah.
Because there's the European clown, which is not like that.
Yeah, nobody like is like, you trained at Lecoq. Ah,
No,
you
it's
know,
true.
like,
Yeah. No, but of course, if you say that I studied clown at Lecoq, suddenly people are like, "Oh no, not clown,
no clown! How dare you?"
So there are no clowns in Fortune's Rule.
There's no clowns in the Ghostlight Anthology at all.
Okay, excellent. Great. So if you were worried, no clowns.
Yes, don't not come see the show because you're worried about clowns. There's no clowns. And then the next piece is titled Swallow. It's by Katerina Watson, which is a beautiful piece. It's sort of more grounded in real world, about you know, the horror of being a person attached to somebody powerful who is abusive. It's, I think, the most timely of all of the pieces we have. It's very sort of mired in the cultural canon of the Me Too movement and what's going on in the world, and a very well crafted look at the real world horror of that.
Shines the light on some of the victims of those people that you don't necessarily think of, that aren't the first people on your mind, I guess.
Yeah. Okay. And there are three more.
Three more.
Right?
Yeah.
So after Swallow, we have Lapse, which is written by Jake Martin.
He's our only local Toronto.
He's our only,
right?
his only super local friend. And it's also brilliant. It's looking at a relationship between two people and memory and how we navigate our inner demons.
That's well put.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I love that piece. I shouldn't I do love all the pieces, but like Swallow and Lapse are like very, very close to my heart.
Yeah.
Lapse because I was absolutely breathless reading it. And I hope Jake listens to this and like gives himself a pat on the back because you know. And I'm working with like these two beautiful actors. I have Michael Sutherland and Jacob Free playing these two people who are, and it's a love story, I think. It's very tragic, but it's a love story, and both of them are just so on board with that. And I think that that's so important when crafting horror. The reason why slasher films aren't scary for most people is you don't care about these victims.
No, it's true.
So to speak.
Yeah.
They're just kind of like, oh, you know, oh, and they died, and oh, and they died.
I mean, in a slasher movie, a lot of the fun is like, who's going to die first? What's going to happen? How are they going to die? What's going to happen?
You know? Whereas like Lapse is definitely, it's about their love story and their relationship, and what gets in the way of that.
And next?
And next we have The Sum of Your Experience by Trace Crawford. Trace Crawford. Yeah. It's I want to say street vampires, but that confuses people. It's a great look at sort of like depersonalization and losing what makes you you. The sort of setup is a thief approaches a man and asks him to put all of his stories and experiences in the bag. She mugs him for his life story.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
It's just about who we are if we don't have our stories.
Wow, okay.
Yeah. And the last one is Sit Down, Daisy. Do you remember the name of the person that wrote Sit Down, Daisy? I'm forgetting.
McDermott. Grant McDermott?
Grant McDermott, thank you.
Okay.
I knew it was with a G. Sorry, Grant. I did really well on memorizing all the other ones.
Yeah.
Grant McDermott wrote Sit Down Daisy. Sit Down Daisy was the first play that I read that I got to a point and I, like, literally I had to put the computer away and I was like, whoa, no. And it's still the one that, like, when we're rehearsing it, when we're going through it, you know, one of the actors will say one of his lines and I'm like, oh God, no.
Full body cringe.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Every time.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah. Sit Down Daisy is set in a coffee shop.
Okay.
And that's all I'm gonna give.
Yeah.
All right then.
Yeah.
All right then. Before I go, usually when I'm talking to people, we're going to talk about your theater origin story.
Oh, yeah.
But before I do that, I do have to say that Andrew, you're something awful. Was I never thought that I could be frightened by a guy standing on a stage telling stories. Like, I did not think that when I heard just, like, stories, I was like, okay, so this is going to be interesting, but I don't see how it's going to be scary. No, it was scary. And I think, you know, I've talked to you about the moment where, like, three people, the two people I was sitting, we all, like, covered our mouths at the same time. Like, I didn't know that was even possible. So, amazing.
Well, thank you.
In terms of that particular piece, when you were... How long did that take you to craft?
Jordi laughs for a reason. It was crafted in panic mode, mostly.
Okay.
It didn't take very long at all. I started writing it when we were accepted to the Fringe, so early 2018.
Okay.
And the rehearsal process, God bless Vince Giulis, because a solid chunk of what was scary about that was from his direction, more so than anything I did as a performer or anything that I did as a writer. He made that show scary. But we rehearsed for 2 weeks tops, and very part-time at that. It was maybe, like, that is the busiest man in the world. And we rehearsed maybe a total of 10 hours on it.
Wow.
If that.
Huh.
But yeah, no, it was panic mode putting it together for sure. But
although a lot of it was sort of, like, solved by discussion and
Yes.
like in terms of, like, crafting the meat of the piece itself. A lot of it was me and Andrew walking home for, like, 45 minutes discussing, you know, what it is and like, you know, like, deciding, because like so much of it was just, like, easy because you just had to, like, phrase you know what had happened
exactly, because they're all, like, it's all stories built out of things that actually happened, right?
So. And so, yeah, like, for, like, I'm thinking about the particular moment where three people covered their mouths. Andrew and I crafted that in the Lakeview.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah, like 11 at night, where it's like, ooh. You know, and as well, like, Andrew crafted a lot of it, just, like, wandering the streets of Toronto after midnight while I was sleeping because I have to work in the morning.
It's interesting because, you know, I've spoken to a couple of people who a very successful thing they wrote, something was quite good, was written, like, at the last minute. Sandra Seamus wrote My Boyfriend's Back and There's Going to Be Laundry on the plane to the Edmonton Fringe.
Amazing.
So, like, this happens. Now, me, I have never been able to write quite like that, but panic is an amazing thing that, like, deadlines are helpful.
Sure.
So, did you know what you wanted to put, like, before you got into the Fringe, did you know what kind of story you were going to tell?
Not at all. No, I knew...
You just had a title?
Pretty much. I had a title, and because for a couple applications, you have to give them a summary, so I put something incredibly vague that I could just work around. I thought Something Wrong was a cool title that was vague enough that I could pretty much attach anything to. I've known for a long time that I wanted to do a solo horror show, but I didn't necessarily know what that meant until I had to craft it. It was very late in the process that it became something that wasn't explicitly fiction. Like, I was like, I was trying to tell a story or play with this trope or become this character or whatever, and then partway through it's just like, I've got all these stories, I might as well just be me, talk about horror movies, talk about why I like them, and talk about some scary things I've been through.
Wow. Yeah, because the show initially was about the roommates.
Yes, it was. It was.
You know, it was like that sort of like middle roommate stuff. It began with centering around Will, I guess, is who it became.
Yeah.
Like a roommate who is like obsessed with, and it had a very sort of almost Marble Hornets feel, if you know, that sort of like internet age Slender Man, like trying to piece together the unreliable narrative, and then at a certain point, it's like, well, it becomes more compelling to be the person you are and talk about the things that you've seen.
So let's get into your theater origin stories. So why is it that you make theater? What is it that has drawn you to it?
Cool. Honestly, I'm going to sound like a broken record here, and I discovered this while I was working on something wrong. Like, if I go back, the reason that I like to tell stories, or that I like to perform theater, or that's important to me, comes from sitting around the campfire as a kid with my parents out camping telling ghost stories. Like, if I try to trace back the first time I ever performed or I ever told a story to somebody, that's where it was. It was just telling scary stories in a campground in the middle of the night. So, like, that's a huge part of it for me. And then it just kind of was the foregone conclusion from there, just school plays into, you know, community theater back home and children's theater back home, and then into theater school, and here we are.
Where was back home?
New Brunswick. St. John, New Brunswick.
Okay. Yeah. Oh yeah, you're one of the St. John people. Yeah. I remember. And what theater school did you decide to go to?
Fanshawe College.
Fanshawe College. Okay. Yeah. That's not one that I hear very often.
No, it's not.
Okay. But if I could just ask, what was it? So it's one thing to be somebody who likes to tell stories. It's one thing to do plays in high school and community theater and things like that. Lots of people do that.
Sure.
What was it that made you decide that this was a thing that you could do?
I don't know. I don't know if it is a thing I can do. I don't know if I've come to that conclusion. Imposter syndrome's a thing, right?
Yes. Yeah.
I don't know. I think I'm going to just sound like I'm real self-deprecating here, but I don't know what else I can do. It was less like, oh, I'm the best at this. I am such a great actor. I'm such a great theater maker. It's like, well, no, it's the only thing I've spent any time doing for, all of high school. Like, I need to pick something to do for post-secondary. It's probably the only thing I've ever dedicated myself to, right?
Did you have an uncomfortable conversation with your guidance counselor?
Nobody at my high school was on board with me as a human.
Okay. Because I have the experience of going to the guidance counselor and saying, like, they're like, so what do you want to do? And you say that I want to be an actor, and they give you, like, there's this long silence. They just look at you like, I don't know what language you're speaking.
Exactly.
My guidance counselor literally Googled theater programs in Canada in front of me.
Oh, God.
Yeah. Jordi, what was your...
Yeah, I'm one of those, like, reprehensible people where it's hard to, like, extricate the theater from me. I've been acting since I was 4 years old, which is literally not an exaggeration. When I was 3, I was a big Barney fan. I really loved watching Barney. And they had this thing at the end that was like, the Lions Club, if you want to be on Barney, send a tape to, whatever.
Sure.
And I used to beg, just beg my mom, like, please, like, let's send a video to Barney, let's, like, and of course, my family was like, oh, so cute, little Jordi wants to meet Barney, and I'm like, no, I want to perform, like, I want to be there, and so, I grew up in the UK, and the way I sort of started is I was in dance. I really loved dance, and so I was in ballet, I was in tap, I was in jazz, I was just dancing all the time. And then there was a theater school that ran on the weekends called U-Tree Theater. And they did a block of acting, a block of dancing, a block of singing, and it was my entire Saturday and Sunday, the whole day. And I begged. I was like, I gotta be in this. I gotta be in this. I gotta be in this. And so, like, literally, my entire life, it's been like, okay, I went to school and did the things that I wanted to do, and then I would instantly go to a dance class or an acting class or a singing class. That's all I had ever done. Had my first professional gig when I was 7. You know, signed to an agent, was, like, going to commercial castings and things like that. And then when I was 12, we moved back to Canada. And we moved to Flin Flon, Manitoba. And it's like, well, there goes all of, like, those classes and things like that. It was like community theater and like dinner theater and what was available. So dance completely went away because there's no dance classes. And so when it came to, like, okay, you have to go to post-secondary or whatever, literally there was no question. You know, it's something that I have been doing since I was 4 years old. It was like, what am I gonna do now? Like, and beyond that, like, I think that being in this industry, you have a lot of those imposter syndromes and things like that. And there's definitely times where I'm like, what am I doing? I'm not good enough to be here or whatever. But I think at the core of me, I have to know that I am brilliant at what I do. I'm brilliant at theater, at creating it. And so I went off to University of Winnipeg. I trained classically with there, and it was an awful experience. It was just terrible. It really beat the hell out of me.
Many theater schools, a lot of theater schools do.
Yeah. And so after, like, a particularly bad, like, final presentation with, like, you know, psychopathic professor that was teaching me, I was like, okay, I'm going to go to school for graphic design and, you know, funnel my creativity into, like, a different aspect. And that very same day, I received a letter from George Brown. I got a call from Randolph Academy, and then, like, a week later, I was waitlisted for Ryerson. And it was just kind of like, these all seem to be signs that perhaps I should not quit and become a graphic designer. So I ended up going to Randolph, and people were like, ooh, what was the choice there? And I'm like, literally, Randolph's program is 2 years straight through. And I was pretty sure at that time that I was fucking done with, like, regular theater. I'm like, I'll be a musical theater person. Took about, like, a term and a half at Randolph to realize that no, I do not want to be in musical theater. But yeah, no, I graduated from that, and that's where I am.
I was just talking to Rosanna Saracino.
Oh, Rosanna, I love her.
From what I can tell, most of her students do.
Yes.
So yeah. And you've worked with her on. Was she involved with Nasty?
Yep, she was the director. Rosanna started as a teacher, and now we're colleagues, co-creators. Like we agree on a lot of stuff stylistically, and then politically, obviously, and also sort of like Rosanna was the first person, like, professional in my life to look at me and be like, no, you know what you need to do, so just fucking do it, kind of thing. And so that's
a really powerful thing from somebody who's a teacher. To have them say that. And I think that's a rare thing in the theater school. Because they don't usually say, they're usually like, be what I need you to be.
Oh, yeah. Exactly. And for me, that's the wonderful thing about Rosanna is that she's a hard ass for sure. She knows what she wants, and she knows what she wants to create, and she's got incredible vision. And I'm, like, so blessed to have had her as a mentor and to have her as a friend. Because there's so many things that we just bounce off of each other and create together that is, like, magical. She's. It's also wonderful because another person who I really consider a mentor and a friend is Dahlia Katz. And Dahlia and Rosanna I would put on the opposite of like the diametric scale of like how they attack things. I would say that they're both like kick-ass, strong women that you would never want to meet in a dark alley because they will tear you to shreds. But like in general of process, it's to have those two people and also the thing that I really respect about them both is that they're strong female creators that don't ever apologize for their opinions or the stuff that they create. They are brilliant and they know they are brilliant. And that is so rare in theater makers, and especially rare in theater makers that aren't men.
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Dahlia is one of those people that I keep meaning to have on. She's like starting something like Solar Stage, Lunar Stage.
Yeah, they just did a number by Carol Churchill.
Yeah,
it's incredible.
Which is
so
exciting.
good. Yeah.
Especially when you've got like that space that they have up at the Witcher.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
Andrew.
Yeah.
When did you start writing? Or did you just start writing for something wrong?
Yeah, I don't consider myself a writer. I've always tried to be a writer, and I never have the follow-through. That was a big part of why I wanted to make something wrong happen, because I always have, a first draft of something that I either didn't finish or can't be bothered to go back and edit, and it's just going to sit there forever. It was a half-baked idea, So no, I'm not a writer. I just happen to write a show.
I disagree with you.
Okay.
I disagree with you.
Great.
Although I will say, and this is the week for having specific conversations with people. Somebody just the other day was sitting here and was saying, I'm almost an actor, and I was like, just hold on, because Neil Gaiman, he has his fabulous blog and he answers questions to people. And somebody says, like, when do I consider myself a writer? When can I call myself a writer? He was like, when you say you are. I said it's the same thing. When can you say that you're an actor? When you say you are.
Sure.
And I know what you mean about finishing things. Is I was working on The Commandment for 8 years.
8 years?
8 years
Wow.
Before I finally said, look, the only way this is going to happen is if I get into a fringe somewhere and I give myself a deadline.
Right.
And that was what it took. That was what it took. So, because I think I probably would still be writing it today.
Fair.
Yeah. So if you, what kind of things were you writing before that? Before Something Wrong?
Oh, I have so many embarrassing, awful things that I have started writing. When I was in theater school, especially, I was heavily influenced by Antonin Artaud, and tried to write some plays in that style. Okay. So I have a lovely folder that I hope no one ever finds of 20-year-old Andrew trying to write Theatre of Cruelty, which is a whole other kind of cruelty.
If you really want to make sure nobody finds that, you're going to have to... You might want to burn that sometime.
Yeah, I probably should.
And yet, it's sometimes hard to... I used to destroy things. Like, I would do my first draft, and I'd be like, nope, that sucks, and I get rid of it. And I so regret that now.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Even though many of those things would be embarrassing to me now, it's still like... There might be something in there that I could salvage.
Right. Well, there was that fantastic show at the Halifax Fringe that was exactly that. Evil was this show that, she found in a box that she wrote when she was 9.
Yeah.
Made her friends perform it now, and it was so funny because it was so just really something that a 9-year-old wrote.
Well, that would be the thing, is that there would be a certain earnestness to it.
Exactly.
You can't manufacture as an adult.
Yeah.
Is Ghostlight Anthology something you guys would like to see happening yearly?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah.
How did you find the authors that you're presenting?
So we put out a huge call for submissions it was January, I think, mid-January. And we just distributed that as widely as possible. We put it up on every writer's Facebook group we could find. We put it out to horror sites specifically. We got a little spammy with it, not going to lie. We put it out just to make sure everybody in the world could see this call for submissions. And we got about 350, I think, was our number.
Wow.
Submissions. So, we got a lot of plays. It was a great response, more than we expected.
And you guys didn't read those just yourself?
Just the two of us.
Just two of us. Yeah. We, to be fair, we didn't read every single play ourselves. It wasn't like I read 350, he read 350.
No.
We had a system where we would read plays, and like for the first sort of like wave, it was like, if it was possible to do this, it wasn't even like really necessarily focusing on quality or what we're trying to say.
Right.
Yeah.
As long as it wasn't like reprehensible or unbearably bad or completely just not what we asked for.
Right.
We would like mark it in like green, and then we would read whatever ones the other person marked as green.
Right.
So that way we culled a lot of the things that just weren't useful to us from the beginning.
Right.
And then it was a process of whittling that down. And once we whittled that down, we passed those scripts off to a few trusted people and got their opinions, and then curated the final selection.
Yeah, I think once we had it down to about 11 or 12, we distributed them a little wider to get a second opinion on them, which was so valuable.
Oh, yeah, because at that point we've been looking at, like, all of these plays for months. Like, my eyes were, like, going square.
Yeah.
Well, there's a certain point at which you're like, you lose perspective.
A little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, there's a part around, like, 270 where I was like, I hate plays, I hate theater. I hate every single person who sent us anything.
Yes.
Although by that point the cream rises, I think. Like it sort of turned into this like gray wash of static by the end. Because like we got a lot of plays that were just solidly good for the most part. Like they were fine. There wasn't anything wrong with them. They just weren't necessarily standout incredible. Yeah. But then both Laps and Sit Down Daisy came in really late in the process and just shone like diamonds. It's like, this is what we're looking for.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's interesting because as you said that, I was thinking about being on the other side of the audition table as well.
Right.
Where after a day of auditions, it mostly becomes a wash. And there's lots of people who were okay. And you remember people who were really good. And you remember people who were really bad.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much the only things you can keep track of at that point.
Pretty much.
So at that point, you were giving it to other people, and you got their feedback, and you whittled it down to a final 5.
Yeah.
Is there is there a particular theme that you find is rolling through the anthology?
There really is. It wasn't necessarily deliberate, at least on my end in the selection process.
It wasn't deliberate on Andrew's end.
But, like, yeah, I'll let you handle that one then. I didn't realize till we did a full read-through.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, this is me Machiavellian behind the scenes. They all have an aspect of, like, depersonalization to them.
Right. Yeah.
The concept of, like, losing yourself and losing your identity. I think that we are in a time in the world where a lot of us are being dehumanized and depersonalized. And I think the overlying theme for that is the fates that are worse than death.
Interesting. So, first off, where's it being presented?
The box.
Oh, right. You mentioned that before. That's the creepy little...
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You have to go through like some kind of creepy murder alley.
Oh,
You surely
yes.
do. Yeah?
Yep.
Okay.
Which was the point.
Okay.
100%.
Yes.
We're
Awesome.
planning to have some fun with that, too.
Yeah, we want it to be a fully immersive experience.
Yeah.
Like, a large portion of, like, doing horror and doing horror theater is that we've kind of, like, stopped ourselves from being like, oh, come see our play, come see our theater, because the general public get real turned off by the T word. They're
Yes.
like, oh, no, boring, I don't want to. And billing it as, like, a live horror experience because we want to undo the sort of, like, cultural contract of going to the theater. We're not going to do programs. We're not going to do, like, you come in and, like, there's, like, the music playing and you're, like, looking at the set and you want it to be, we want, like, from the second you get to that creepy murder alley for you to be invested in the experience of going through and getting there and that you don't have this, like, wall of, like, here we are, now we're going to tell you to turn off your phones and, oh, by the way, we stole this land. Like,
Yes.
Yeah.
Huh. I guess that, I mean, the whole, it's funny how calling it a live horror experience, just like, which is what it is, but it's also theater, lets you sort of, like, get away from what people are expecting.
Yeah.
I've often wanted to do, like, just to do like a sci-fi show and just put in 3D on it, just because we are,
Of course.
Yes.
you know. But because it's the things that are the trappings of film that I think draw people in a little. They're like, wait,
Yeah.
what is that? What is that?
Yeah.
So, and again, we're talking about getting people out to see stuff away from the Netflix. It's experiences that they need to see. And it opens on
18th, October 18th.
October 18th. So good Halloween timing.
Exactly.
Excellent.
Close on
Excellent.
Halloween night.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah.
And it's a
Perfect.
Wednesday, so it's like not like people got much to do.
No,
So
it's true.
Come
Awesome.
on out on
Yeah,
a
yeah, yeah.
Wednesday. Yeah.
That's great. Well, thank you so much, you guys. It's been awesome.
Yeah, thanks
Thank
for having
you for
us.
having us.
This has been a Homebody Productions production.